First up is Ghostbusters 2, and I know a lot of people weren't very keen on this movie, but I quite enjoyed it at the time, and I've recently rewatched it just before Ghostbusters Afterlife came out, and I still think it's okay. Definitely not as well written as the original, but it does have its moments of greatness. The video game adaptation takes 3 key scenes from the film and turns them into different levels. When you first play the game, then the objective of these may be a bit unclear to you. It isn't simply a case of getting to the bottom of the sewers, for example, or just blasting away at all the enemies during the second Statue of Liberty stage. Instead, you are supposed to be collecting slime samples so you can study them and come up with a way of defeating Vigo the Carpathian once and for all. I do think the graphics are pretty good in the game, in the first level especially, where there is a nice looking and well animated sprite of Ray descending down on a rope. The giant Statue of Liberty in level 2 looked pretty good too. There are some nice tunes during the in-between story scenes as well, but none during the gameplay, which is a shame. A bit of music could have livened up the stages quite a bit. The main issue though is that the game just isn't all that fun to play and can be downright frustrating at times. For example, there is a little grey skull-like enemy on level 1 that will attach itself to your rope and send Ray falling to his doom, unless you deal with it pretty quickly, but these little bastards just keep coming and it'd be quite a faff to constantly switch to a different weapon in order to deal with them before it's game over. Zap gave Ghostbusters 2 a very harsh score of 39% and called it a hodgepodge of sub-games that failed to gel into a good game. I think that 39% is perhaps being a little bit harsh, maybe somewhere in the mid-50s. This is definitely the weakest game in this collection, but there are some great ones to come. If there's one game that could be said to have really put Ocean Software on the map and set them up for years of success, then it most definitely had to be RoboCop. Securing the license to the as yet unfinished movie was a work of genius, and the game that was produced as a result was really solid, deservedly selling thousands of copies to eager kids who thought the whole concept was really cool, and either weren't allowed to see the film because they were too young, or had just seen it regardless on a dodgy VHS. Ocean had dabbled with the licensed games before this point, but the result was awful games like Street Hawk and Miami Vice. It wasn't until RoboCop where they got it right and came up with a template that was imitated countless times over, not just by them, but by the other publishers of the time such as US Gold and Activision. In my opinion, RoboCop features some of the greatest music ever included in a Commodore 64 game, thanks to the genius that is Jonathan Dunn. Even loading from tape was well worth it just to be able to enjoy the Ocean Loader tune, but the in-game stuff was just as good, from the funky tune that plays during the gameplay to the mournful music on the high score table after you have inevitably died. Visually too, things are great, with a really well drawn and clear RoboCop sprite going up against waves of street thugs and the occasional Ed 209. If there is one knock against RoboCop, I would have to say it was the harsh difficulty. The game can be incredibly tough, especially on the very first stage. Strangely, it gets a bit easier after that, but I would very rarely make it to that point without the assistance of cheats. For the most part, RoboCop is a platform shooter, but there are a couple of other gameplay styles such as the photo fit puzzle and saving hostages. Zap awarded the game a score of 89% and concluded their review with an atmospheric interpretation of a great theme. The importance of RoboCop as a game can't be understated, but I would put it in second place overall in this collection, as I feel the steep difficulty curve detracts from the experience a little bit. It still very much deserves a first class award though. The game deserving of the top spot in this compilation is Batman the Movie, which was another massively hyped film upon release. This is of course based on the Tim Burton movie starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, which I watched a lot when it came out, but I haven't gone back to for many years now. By the time this game came out, the Ocean movie game formula was well established, but if movie scenes lend themselves well to some kind of gameplay like they do in this case, then more often than not they were successful. The C64 version of Batman wasn't really the one getting all of the hype at the time, because the Amiga 500 was out by then and Commodore were offering the Batman pack, which kids were clamouring to get hold of. Those who were still gaming on their C64 shouldn't feel too disappointed though, because this version of the game was also very good. Once again, the bulk of the game consists of platform stages, but compared to RoboCop, Batman is a lot more nimble and able to zip up to higher platforms with the help of his grappling hook. The game begins in Axis Chemicals with you hunting down Jack Napier. The level is quite maze-like and you have to be careful about taking the correct path, because if you fall from too high, then you will die. When you do finally catch up with Jack, one knock from your Batarang sends him into a vat of chemicals and transforms him into the Joker. From that point, it's your job to prevent him from murdering half of Gotham City with his deadly Smilax gas. First you must rush back to the Batcave in the Batmobile, then figure out which ingredients make up the poison gas so you can develop an antidote. You must also pilot the Batwing and cut the ropes of all the poison-filled balloons before tracking down the Joker in the Cathedral and dealing with him once and for all. I think this game has a nice mix of gameplay styles that are all fairly well done. The platform stages can prove a little bit frustrating due to their maze-like layouts, but once you learn the correct route through them, they aren't so bad. Both of the driving sections are pretty good with nice little sprites of the Batmobile and Batwing. I like that they haven't tried to make a one-on-one copy of the Amiga version and instead have made a game that works on the 8-bit C64 instead. That was a smart decision. If you know what you're doing or have cheats on, like I did while capturing this footage, then it really doesn't take very long to get through the entire game. But if you're still getting used to it and learning the best path through the platform levels, then it will probably take you a few attempts before you can beat it. So the game does offer a decent challenge. Zap absolutely raved about Batman the movie, giving it a massive 96% and saying, "The movie of the year gets the game it deserves." Like I said already, this is my favourite game from the Hollywood collection and thoroughly deserves its first class award. The final game took me by surprise quite a bit because I have never played it before and I had kind of written it off as being not very good. That game is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the action game, and I actually found myself having quite a lot of fun with it. Unlike the other games featured in this episode, this one doesn't really jump around in style between the levels. The whole thing is a platformer. A few of the levels are more maze-like, such as the very first one inside the dark caves. Here you will constantly have to find new torches so that the lights don't go out, and your task is to track down the cross relic that was seen in the prologue to the film. Strangely though, the Indy sprite looks like a grown man already. In the film this was the scene where he was a boy, played by River Phoenix. The main sprite does resemble Harrison Ford though, and is nicely animated. The controls can be a bit fiddly in this first level, especially when trying to navigate the hanging ropes. Like RoboCop, I think this is another game where the first stage is one of the more difficult ones, and then things get a bit easier afterwards. There's another stage where you are running across the roof of the circus train and jumping over giraffes and rhino horns. This was a lot of fun and very nicely depicted. Then there's another maze-like level on the Nazi Zeppelin before you face the path of the penitent man to recover the Grail at last. Just like Ghostbusters 2, I feel that The Last Crusade could have been made more exciting with some background music during the levels, rather than just sound effects. As such, it can feel a bit lifeless. Overall though, I think this is a decent effort at a movie game. I never tried it back in the day for a few different reasons. I didn't know anyone who owned it, the reviews were very bad, including Zap giving it just 36%, and I was more interested in playing the graphic adventure game on my dad's Amiga than this action version. I don't think the game is nearly as bad as I was led to believe though. I enjoyed playing it. So that's that then. Two truly exceptional movie games, one that's pretty decent and one that looks okay but is a bit ropey to actually play. That's about on par for this sort of compilation, I would say. For the final episode I am going to be looking at Taito coin-op hits from Imagine and taking the same approach from my Konami coin-op hits where I compare them to the arcade original. I also already have some plans for a second series of 6 episodes, but I'm not sure when I will be making those just yet. I would like to take a bit of a break and focus on a different system for a while, either the PS1, the Sega Saturn or the Amiga. I haven't decided which one just yet. Until then though, join me for another episode of Cover Tape Chaos Zapped next week, and then the week after for the last in this current series. Hope to see you back again for those. In the meantime, take care.